other just quick thing of where we're at as far as the app, so you can kind of get a quick overview of some of this. So the toolbar here, I just want to explain a little bit of what this is just to make your life easier. So obviously this little button here on the top left is your collapse button for your left navigation. Now I'm 45, so some of this kind of gets a little small depending on the screen that I'm looking at. So one thing also just is underneath view, you can zoom in just the sidebar or like the main middle area here. So if I zoom in the sidebar, now it's a little bit bigger. I can also make that a little bit bigger there. Let's zoom that in a little bit more. Boom. Okay. Cool. Yeah, those the little information on the very right there is getting dropped off. That's a bug. I gotta fix it. But the point is, now I can read it. So cool. So there's that. You have your groups, which is just your organization with your programs, disk groups, volumes, key groups, and your samples. You can select them. You can, little chevrons to expand if you need to. Usually they just be wide open, but if you have a huge library thing built in here, like some CD or something, you might want to organize and minimize, expand, whatever. Cool. You got your browser. This is where we need to see that. So let me, oops, not zoom in. I need to go to reset sidebar zoom. There we go. So you can add a folder. We'll just take, we'll add that. Fine. There we go. So you can add folders. It's looking for samples, and of course this is like an image, so I gotta update the logic to also look for images and .hdas, so that's why it's not shown there. But so here's, and notice when you click on this stuff, you get the little preview in the bottom left corner. Okay, so and then you have your slice library, which I'll do a separate video on this, but that's where that is. We go back to samples here. If you click on this little guy here, that is to add more sounds. So I don't know, I'll take this folder with some examples. I can grab a whole bunch of samples all at once, or I could just do in one individually. I could clear out all my samples. Boom, clear out with that. Let's add some more back in. Okay, you can also drag in, drop like from Finder, just right in there. Regroup. Now, regroup at first may not make any sense, but the thing is, Akai is a little bit weird with the way they do their the program and the key groups. And then if you go from a GoTech to a SCSI, so like right now I'm in a GoTech setting for the S1000, and so I'm limited to that 1.6 megabytes. So auto grouped for that sizing and by the file name in the order that we had. But let's say I go over here and I change that to SCSI. Let's get rid of this. Now, I know that all these could easily fit on the SCSI, but maybe you wanted them separate for whatever reason. So notice the disk groups just change into volumes or partitions, right? That's all it did. But realistically, this would be silly to have 4 partitions or 4 volumes for such small things. So what I could do here is I could just hit this little regroup button, and it will re-look at to see, okay, hey, what is the current sampler and what's the current target? And say, okay, that's the file size or partition size that we're working with. So now I can redistribute based off of those settings. So you can see now it's 5.3 megabytes of a 60 megabyte partition. So it put it all into one volume, volume A in this case. So that's what that regroup button is all about. Next is we have our slicer tool, which, not slicer, our left-right processing. I forgot I changed the icon. We have our left-right processing. I'll do a separate video on that, but that's where we can manipulate the left-right channel stuff. We have our remove silence button to look for any silent samples in here that don't want to be there. We have our slicer tool, which again I'll do a separate video on. This should just say coming soon. Okay, good. This is our a multi-track recorder concept I'm working on. I will talk about that later when I actually have something to show. This will probably pop up on your screen, but it won't really work and it won't make any sense. Which is the screw sequencer. It's ugly right now. That's just because I'm just working on the engine portion of this. For right now, you can completely ignore this. When I get it built out and it works and it's awesome, I will talk about it. But if you see that, you're like, well, what is that? It's the whole. It's just basically it's a step sequencer that's going to play back these samples in MIDI, and then you can get your whole sequence going. Use the vintage audio engine to get an idea what it might sound like, and then if all goes as planned, you'll be able to use this little live performance button down here in the bottom right that you'll be able to then send the MIDI and send that information to trigger on your Kai. And if everything goes really, really right, and I can get the firmware working with the Zula SCSI, you might even be able to, and this is a very strong might, not promising this, but I'm hopeful, I can get to be able to have this push the data over USB-C. It would be at USB 1.1 speeds, which sucks a little bit, but it's still faster than MIDI as far as transferring. It's not as fast as transferring just via the SD card, but it would be sweet to not have to like move the SD card. You know, it'd be pretty awesome to just be able to do this kind of like the old recycle days where it's like you send it right over, do your chops right here, send it, do the manipulation, play it back there, send it back, etc. So kind of a bi-directional process is some of the hope, but we'll see. And the multi-track recorder is going to work hand in hand with that groove sequencer to play through your Kai, bring it back in through the multi-track recorder, and then, you know, get all your stems and then take it to a proper DAW. Other things at the top here, because I'm getting off track, is you have your auto program key group sort of creation thing. Like, you know, it's kind of self-explanatory. You got your drum one shots, you got your chromatic split, full range. Couple things to note is with your key range, you know, some of these samplers, for some of the samples, from what I understand, I haven't experienced this or tried, but I understand that some of the older models didn't really play well at the upper ranges, like we're straining the audio too much. So if you want to limit to, you know, C6 or something, you certainly could do so. I put the recommendation for each sampler depending on what the sampler that you're selected on. Drum one shot, the idea would be like, so actually you can see start, so we'll just do it. So if I go to my table view, I can see C2 to C2, C2 sharp to C2 sharp, D2 to D2, etc. Right? So that's doing it one shot versus if you did it like chromatic split. So you can see now it's doing a larger range for each. Or if I go back to full range, okay, now it's doing the full range for each one. So depending on what you're trying to do, if you're doing a bass sound and you want to pitch it up and down, or if you're trying to do, drum breaks and you already have it using the transpose or tune, and you have it all like sound where you want, you just want to be able to trigger it, well, then you want the drum chop one. If you want, whatever, I don't know. You get the idea. You can choose the mode that you want. This will make your life easier just to map it out super fast. You can still go in here and manually change all the stuff, right? So it's not that you can't do it. I'm just trying to speed up the process. You shouldn't have these yellow and green little icons. If you do, you can ignore them. This is just for me doing development, where basically it randomizes all the values. I needed a way that I could one of the 20 million tests that I have had to go back and forth. I got sick of trying to adjust all the values and make sure the values were loaded in my sampler. So I have two different random generators for two different purposes to randomize my values, and I can make sure that they're loading properly on the screen. So that's your main toolbar stuff. Obviously, you have your samples, you have your sample edit, you have your key group edit, and you have to click one of the key groups to see which one you're editing. Same thing on the sample edit. And also, just as a heads up, in case you are, I don't know, let's say you're over in samples, if you double click, it brings you right into the sample edit. Okay, if you double click on the key group, it brings you right to the key group edit. And then if you're in the table view, that just gives you the overview of all of the parameters basically. Notice the green highlight, I may change that, but that's just showing that this whole particular volume is selected or active. It's kind of ugly. I may mess with that, but that's the main idea. And then of course you learn your virtual MIDI, your macro knobs, and then we already talked about this in another video. So there you go. Hope that helps in terms of the the top toolbar area.